So I received some questions from one of you almost half a year ago, asking me what prompted me to start reading, how I make time for reading, and why I read classics, etc. So I thought I'd make this short video answering those questions and maybe sharing some tips for reading. Here's a bit about me. I don't have a degree in English or literature. My 2 uni degrees are in maths and economics. And I also have ADHD, which means that I'm not like the typical reader out there who's been reading since they were like 4 or 5 years old. For me, it was like 14 or 15. So, with that in mind, what inspired me to start reading? The answer is simple, and I'm going to show you a clip from an anime show.
最初に一冊読むなら何がいいでしょう。アンドロイドは電気羊の夢を見るか。古い映画の原作ですね。だいぶ内容が違う。いつか暇な時に比較してみるといい。ダウンロードしておきます。紙の本を買いなよ。電子書籍は味気ない。そういうもんですかね。本はね、ただ文字を読むんじゃない。自分の感覚を調整するためのツールでもある。調整？調子の悪い時に本の内容が頭に入ってこないことがある。そういう時は何が読書の邪魔をしているか考える。調子が悪い時でもスラスラと内容が入ってくる本もある。なぜそうなのか考える。精神的な調律、チューニングみたいなものかな。調律する際大事なのは紙に指で触れている感覚や本をペラペラめくった時瞬間的に脳の神経を刺激するものだ。
What that character just said was like an awakening for me. By the way, the anime show is called Psychopaths and I watched it in 2012. It was originally ad. Anyway, the primary reason why I read is because reading is a form of forced meditation. Especially when I feel agitated, which happens quite often, I make a deliberate effort to read. I also make myself read books or articles that I know are important but may not initially pique my interest because I know once I start to follow the plot line or engage with the author's logic or grasp the essence of the material, I will derive benefit from it. Now, when I say reading, I'm not referring to effortless reads like manga, but more like classics and some great contemporary novels. Reading these books requires concentration, patience, and single-mindedness. ADHD is a lifelong condition, so I need a lifelong habit to combat it. Whenever I find myself struggling to concentrate on what I read, I'll always identify the cause and try to calm myself down. I could also meditate, but reading serves that purpose for me as well. While I'm here, I might as well recommend some books. I think Ishiguro's books are, pretty great for this purpose because his writing is very calm and meditative. The second reason/tip that I'd suggest is to find a role model who happens to read a lot or a source of inspiration. So for me, the answers are pretty obvious. The anime show that I just showed you, a manga that I read in high school called Bungo Stray Dogs, and Booktube, because I don't use TikTok. Oh, by the way, Bungo Stray Dogs is also adapted into an anime show. I think there are 4 seasons now. Basically, the authors of the manga reimagined a bunch of famous authors from the 19th and 20th centuries by depicting them with supernatural powers. So for example, Dostoevsky is in that manga/anime, and his supernatural ability is crime and punishment. Daza Osamu's supernatural ability is no longer human, and for F. Scott Fitzgerald, it's The Great Gatsby, etc. And my role model is Jordan B. Peterson, who is a Canadian clinical psychologist. He was so eloquent and ferocious in a lot of his interviews. I watched a ton of his videos on YouTube and I just savor the moments when he was being savage. The third reason/tip is to find a grand purpose. Try to envision what kind of person you will become after reading a lot of books. For me, I want to be well-versed and be able to articulate my thoughts with precision. I mentioned Jordan B. Peterson before as an example of eloquence. And after graduating university, I noticed my expression of thoughts was very bland during my job interviews and I found that so embarrassing. So I wanted to improve myself, and that was one of the reasons why I started reading more classics. Alongside that is my realization that the real world, unlike mathematics, does not neatly fit into theorems with reasons providing proofs. I think I'd always known that, but turn a blind eye to it. So I needed to open my eyes. I needed to read more books, distill insights and share my opinions, and it all started with reading. The fourth tip that I tried before and found useful is to set a reading goal for every day and make it so easy that you can't not do it. Like read 2 pages every day. And after a while, your brain's gonna adapt to this kind of low dopamine inducing activity, and as you gradually add more and more pages, your brain will recognize you know, the enjoyment reading brings, and we'll start to associate reading with something that is rewarding. The fifth tip is something that I've been doing for many years, and I'd recommend this to everyone, which is to read multiple books from different genres at the same time. You know, if you don't like what you're reading, then try a different one. You don't need to feel pressured to finish the book that you're currently reading. Again, it's all about getting yourself excited about reading and for your brain to associate reading with something stimulating. Eliminate unnecessary mental barriers. This tip is important because I did resist reading for a long time. Reading was challenging for me, but at least I could have tried when I was much younger. The thing is that when I identified myself as someone who hated reading and couldn't read, I created this unnecessary mental barrier for myself. And later, whenever I read great books like 1984, To Kill a Mockingbird, Great Expectations, I always regretted not starting to read earlier. Next, I'd highly recommend reading physical books rather than on a digital device, like a Kindle. This is especially important for someone with ADHD because almost every productive guru is saying reading on Kindle, and I don't think that's a good piece of advice. Devices are distracting because I can always connect to the internet and browse new books instead of reading. And again, please watch the clip that I showed you earlier. Reading physical books is like tuning your mind, so read physical books. My last tip for you is to try audiobooks. You can't deny that some books are just tough to get through, for example, June. Plus, it's a mammoth. It's got like 500 plus pages. It took me forever to read, so I listened to the audiobook instead. And that counted as reading as well. Alright, I'm gonna answer some questions now. So the first two questions are when I read most and how I make time for reading. Well, first of all, I listen to audiobooks when I eat and do chores. And then I usually read at night. So basically, every night I'll go on social media to get a hit of dopamine before I read. And I'll usually read 50 to 100 pages before bedtime, and I sleep at around 9 p.m. and get up at around 4:30. Well, it took me a long time to get myself to sleep and wake up early, but it's been great. I can get some, important stuff done in the morning and have some peace at night. The next question is how I choose books. So I always prioritize classics and great contemporary novels. So what I do at the beginning of a year is to write down a list of 20 plus books that I want to read that year and distribute them to each month. So every month I'll have a book or two that I've planned to read, and I'll add to that monthly list of books whatever I want to read at the beginning of each month. Oh, by the way, I get my book recommendations from YouTube and Reddit. I'm actually crazy about planning, if you can't tell. I've got 3 planners where I write down what I might be reading, what I actually plan to read, and what I actually read. This is also my journal, by the way. And the good thing about making a plan is that even if I don't follow my plans at all, which happens quite often, but because the plan's there, so I know what I should have read, but I read those books instead, so I'll come up with another plan to, deal with the situation. Last but not least, I'd like to explain why I read classics, apart from the reasons I've mentioned before. Objectively speaking, some books hold more significance than others. You can't deny that classical literature is among the most thought-provoking. This is of course not to say that books from other genres are bad or inferior to classics. Like if you were to ask me to choose between manga and classics, I couldn't. Classics are important because their influence has transcended time and impacted generations of people, thinkers, and writers like Dostoevsky, Dickens. Classics also explore timeless themes like the question of free will in One Piece, and their language and style are elegant, like Orlando and Lolita. In general, I'd compare reading to investing in bonds and reading classics to investing in senior unsecured corporate bonds. If the corporate issuer defaults, you lose your money. If you don't enjoy classic, waste your time. Just kidding, please ignore what I said. I just couldn't come up with a better way to conclude this. Anyways, I hope this video has been helpful, and thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Ciao! And the good thing about